Hello everyone. Welcome to the second webinar in our Carbon Farming Outreach Program webinar series. Today we're going to be focusing on nature repair. So just a short disclaimer at the start here, just that the information contained in this presentation remains the property of ABC Foundation and may only be used for internal purposes. The content within this presentation is deemed accurate for the purpose of promoting carbon farming, nature repair and land management practices. And discussions of the ACCU scheme and financial benefits of nature repair are general in nature, and attendees should seek independent advice for their specific circumstances. Access and use of any of the information contained in this presentation may only occur by written consent of the ABC Foundation CEO. Before we start, I want to acknowledge the Whadjuk Noongar people whose country I am on today. And ABC Foundation acknowledges and pays respect to the past, present and future elders and traditional owners of this country and throughout Australia, and recognises their continuing connection to land, waters and community. We celebrate the continuation of cultural, spiritual and educational practices of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. I'll just go through some of our learning objectives for today's webinar. So number one, we want to understand what nature repair is and how it relates to caring for country. Number two, we want to recognise ecosystems as living, interconnected systems that can be protected and repaired. Number three, understand how nature repair supports biodiversity, climate resilience and ecosystem function. Number four, identify how land and sea management decisions influence ecosystem health over time. Number five, look at some of the principles, opportunities and limitations of nature repair projects. And number six, gain confidence to engage in informed decisions and discussions about nature repair, governance and the long-term responsibilities associated with them. So why are we even talking about nature repair? So human activity, agriculture and land clearing have left large patches of Australian country degraded and unproductive. And since colonisation, about 45% of Australian forests have been cleared. And much of what's left has been degraded or left unproductive. And those two maps to the right there just show, the top one shows the pre-1750 vegetation cover compared to the current cover at the bottom. And what we're really highlighting here is that light green area around the coast, which is all agricultural land now. Land degradation and clearing is a significant contributor to climate change. When forests are cut down, all of that stored carbon is released back into the atmosphere. And current climate trends show warmer conditions and shifting rainfall, with projections pointing to continued change into the future. And nature repair work is just one possible solution to this. So what is nature repair? Well, nature repair is just restoring, protecting, and improving ecosystems to rebuild biodiversity, ecosystem health, and natural functions. As ecosystems are living, interconnected systems, with each organism having an important role to play within the ecosystem. And many of these ecosystems are fragile, where losing one key species or function could cause a full-on collapse. So each species within an ecosystem serves a function. Trees provide shelter and stability, insects pollinate, worms decompose, etc., etc. And so nature repair focuses on restoring these functions and increasing ecosystem resilience to future change or disturbance, including climate change. And healthy ecosystems are functional ecosystems. So how do ecosystems actually work and function? Well, ecosystems rely on interactions between living and non-living elements. An example of living interacting with living, you have animals eating others or eating plants, or even birds nesting within a tree. An interaction between living and non-living, you have plants growing on a rock face, roots absorbing water or nutrients, etc. And non-living interactions such as a river cutting through rock, wind erosion, and so on. So these interactions form the basis of many ecosystem functions, systems, and cycles. For example, energy, nutrients, and water all cycle through ecosystems. and disruption to one part of this system could affect the whole. And so healthy systems are self-supporting and adaptive to change. Where one part might be disruptive, the whole ecosystem as a whole won't be disrupted. And on the right, there's just a little diagram showing how some of the different things cycle through an ecosystem. So, what are some of the most important functions and systems that an ecosystem has? Well, pollination, insects pollinating flowers, we need that to produce fruit. Water filtration, providing clean water for plants and animals to use. Nutrient cycling is really important for plants to uptake nutrients. Soil formation and stability. Habitat provision, providing resources for building nests or for digging burrows. Climate regulation, as ecosystems and forests, they tend to buffer changes in temperature and weather. And of course, many, many more. So in general, ecosystems with many different and diverse organisms are healthier and more resilient. And this is because there is redundancy in their functions. If one species is lost, their functions won't be. For example, if there's a type of insect that decomposes woody material and that goes extinct, there might be other insect species that perform similar functions, and so the ecosystem won't be as affected. And so this variety of species, as well as the differences within the species, is what we call biodiversity. And biodiversity can be broken down into three kind of general levels. The first level being genetic diversity. This is just the variation and differences of the genes within a species. So this could mean different coat colors in dogs, or the genes that give us different eye colors. You have species diversity, which is the number and variety of different species in an ecosystem. So this, for example, is a koala and a kangaroo. They're different species. And then you also have ecosystem diversity, which is the range of different habitats, ecosystems, and ecological processes that occur in an area. So, for example, forests, wetlands, grasslands, and coral reefs. So, how does biodiversity affect our long-term outcomes? Well, healthy ecosystems, those that are high in biodiversity, are more resilient to climate impacts. And so as temperature and weather shift, some species might not be able to survive in these altered conditions. But high biodiversity ecosystems are less affected by those changes, as other species that perform the same or very similar roles can fill the space that those species have lost. And so nature repair supports climate adaptation and mitigation. So degraded systems limit future land use options, which is kind of why we want to be repairing and restoring nature. So when environmental systems are disrupted or degraded, this can cause many negative effects on the land. For example, you could see loss of soil fertility, reduced water availability or quality, increased erosion from wind or water, and a decline in ecosystem services such as pollination or pest control. So therefore, by protecting and repairing nature, we are also protecting our future productivity. We are safeguarding ourselves. So nature repair supports biodiversity and species survival, as higher biodiversity allows more ecosystem services and functions. For example, a species will have more food options or more shelter and habitat options, or etc., which makes their survival as a whole a little bit easier. And repair supports long-term holistic care for country. So how do our land and sea management decisions affect our biodiversity outcomes? One example is clearing and degrading the land. We all know that's bad for the environment, but why exactly is that bad for the environment? Well, when land is cleared, the plants that have been cut down, such as the trees, they start to decompose with the help of bacteria and fungi and other decomposers. Those decomposers, just like us, they also breathe, so they release that carbon back into the atmosphere. And all of the services that this ecosystem previously provided have also now been lost. And so Another way that land management decisions impact the land is through invasive species. They disrupt natural balance and harm ecosystems that have evolved in a specific type of balance over many thousands of years. And invasive species are just non-native organisms which tend to spread rapidly, causing major harm to ecosystems. And they can outcompete native species, spread disease, be parasitic, disrupt ecosystem relationships, increase the risk of fire, and many more negative effects. So good land management supports ecosystem recovery and regeneration, but the key thing here is this takes time. Ecosystem change often occurs over very long time frames. And so an ecosystem could be destroyed in a very short time frame, like a day or a week, but then would take decades to fully recover. And so nature positive work means just leaving nature in a better condition than before, restoring and enhancing ecosystems rather than just minimizing your damage. So what this means is any work that you are doing needs to also be leaving a positive impact on nature. So, how do we actually recognize the signs of healthy, stressed, and degraded ecosystems? Well, to identify healthy ecosystems, we look for high biodiversity. If there's a great variety of species to perform many different ecosystems, functions, and services that are required. If there are stable and balanced populations of species, as if the relationships are balanced, no one species dominates the land. Functional cycling, so nutrients, water, and carbon all flow appropriately through the system. And regeneration and resilience. Ecosystems can buffer and then recover from disturbance much better than those that aren't healthy. So how do we see stressed ecosystems? Well, there's reduced function. Some of the ecosystem services aren't being fulfilled, or they are reduced in level. There could be a population imbalance, so a single species, usually a non-native invasive species, or a group of organisms that have a very similar kind of function, they are outcompeting the native species. Reduced vegetation cover, as trees tend to struggle due to some of the reduced ecosystem services that you might be seeing. And poor recovery. The ecosystem might have an inability to respond to disturbance appropriately. So, signs of degraded ecosystems. These are ecosystems that have fully been destroyed and the ecosystem has collapsed. There's a complete loss of key species or groups, as species are unable to survive without some of their key services. Fully collapsed functions. The ecosystem is completely unfunctional or severely reduced. There is no pollination, there is no habitat provision, that sort of stuff. You'll see an altered landscape. There could be a loss of the tree canopy, which might be one of those key species. The soils would be eroded and you would see fragmented landscapes and altered water flows. And also you'd see little to no regeneration. The ecosystem cannot regenerate without human intervention at this point. So what are some of the principles that we should be keeping in mind for protecting and repairing ecosystems? Well, firstly, protection and prevention is always the best. Protecting intact ecosystems is a priority. There's no replacement for what ecosystem is already there. So preventing pollution, exploitation, and destruction. Protecting local species and genetic diversity and managing invasive species. Reducing ongoing pressures before attempting repair is quite important, as if you had started repairing the ecosystem before reducing the pressures, then the ecosystem is just going to degrade back to how it was. So restore and maintain ecological integrity is really important. This just means restoring and protecting the structure of the ecosystem, including its functions and the natural processes. And what we mean by structure is the different levels and the different kind of groups of organisms that you'd see. So trees, the smaller plants, small animals, birds, they fall into different categories. That's the structure. And these form the bedrock of the ecosystems. Restoring them first allows life to thrive. And an important one is to work with natural recovery rather than forcing outcomes. As if you try to force outcomes, you may never actually achieve the outcome that you're looking for. Adaptive management is another important principle, which just means structured ongoing monitoring, which informs the changes in management. And this just ensures that the practices that you are applying are the best fit for it. Landscape connectivity is also very important, as fragmented landscapes create isolated populations, which leads to inbreeding, disrupted migration, and increased risk of extinction. And climate change integration as well. So plan ahead, plan for the future, check the climate change predictions for your area, and plan the species accordingly. So one way we can protect and restore ecosystems is through nature repair projects. So what are nature repair projects? That nature repair projects just involve repairing and protecting ecosystems and their functions. And this can be done through activities such as native vegetation restoration. So this could be direct planting and seeding. And then also it could be protecting remnant vegetation. Invasive species control, and reintroducing endangered species, and then reconnecting the different habitats through nature corridors. So nature repair projects, they aim for measurable ecological improvement, not just simple activity on the land. And so through this, that means they're actually looking for some very specific outcomes. And those could be an increase in biodiversity, improved ecosystem quality or health, restored function and resilience to disturbance, and reduced or completely removed threats. Another interesting thing about nature repair projects is you can integrate something called culturally significant entities, which this is a measure of your project success that reflects the cultural values, practices, and relationships of the people of that area. So this could be a place, a thing, a matter, or a process. And it just has to have some cultural significance to the relevant First Nations people. So for example, this could be cultural site protection, totemic species, or traditional food and medicine. And integrating those into your project, you can use those as a measurement of your success. So nature repair projects need to follow approved methodologies, just like carbon farming projects. But what methods are actually available at the moment? Well, currently there's only one approved method, as the nature repair market only came into effect midway through 2025. And that method is called the Replanting Native Forest and Woodland Ecosystems method. So what does that mean? This just means projects earn certificates by revegetating cleared land, replanting native species, and supporting ecological connectivity. It's important to note that new methods are constantly being developed and the old ones revised. So it's important to check the DECU website for more information. Currently, there's a few methods under development, and so these are the Enhancing Native Vegetation method. And this just means that projects that enhance biodiversity in already existing native vegetation can earn biodiversity certificates. And then the Protect and Conserve method, where projects that deliver long-term protection and conservation of biodiversity on private land can earn certificates. So you've heard me say biodiversity certificates a few times. So what actually are they, and how do I earn or sell them? So nature repair projects that have delivered measurable biodiversity outcomes and submitted their reports can earn something called a biodiversity certificate. This is issued digitally through the online registry, and only one certificate is issued per project. And so this certificate, it'll outline all the biodiversity outcomes that you have achieved for your project, and that'll inform the price of the certificate. Certificates are different to credits, as carbon credits, you earn them continually as you deliver those benefits, whereas a certificate is just earned once you have shown that you are delivering those benefits, but no more certificates are issued after that. but certificates can be sold in the same way as ACCUs. The difference here, though, is biodiversity certificates are only sold on the voluntary market. There is currently no obligation for organisations or companies to purchase biodiversity certificates, and so they are all bought, sold and traded by philanthropists or environmentally conscious individuals or groups. There's no set value for them either, as the price fluctuates with the different biodiversity outcomes that you have achieved on your project. So, nature repair projects, what are the opportunities, limits, and responsibilities that you might have? Some of the opportunities, well, the first one is the nature repair market. This just provides financial incentives for nature repair work, and this is what we've been talking about through this presentation. Currently, this is the only formal version of nature repair in Australia, but you can also look for local community-based environmental work, or you can just start protecting and conserving existing local biodiversity in your area. What are some of the limits of nature repair? Well, not every area is suitable for a formal project. Each method has its own eligible area where activity can take place, and so it's really important to check that before you commence a project. And some ecological damage is just irreversible. The ecosystem can never fully return to its previous state, as some of the extinctions are permanent. And ecological improvements can take decades or even centuries to show sometimes. What are some of the responsibilities associated with a nature repair project? Well, prior to starting a project, the operator must establish something called a baseline, which is what you use to identify your measurable biodiversity targets. And so baseline data, this is just the measured starting condition of the ecosystem before you've started your nature repair project. So what does it currently look like now? And this is important, as all future ecological improvements are then assessed against that baseline to determine your project's success. Other responsibilities? Well, projects involve ongoing monitoring, reporting, and long-term commitment. And the biggest one here is permanence. Similar to carbon farming projects, nature repair projects also have an obligation for permanence. But here, instead of maintaining carbon outcomes for that allotted amount of time, you are maintaining biodiversity outcomes. And in the same way, it's either 25 or 100 years. And so keeping accurate and up-to-date records is essential. And it's also really important to submit regular reports. So nature repair and carbon farming, what's the connections, what's the differences? Well, carbon farming obviously focuses on carbon outcomes, while nature repair work focuses on biodiversity and ecosystem health. There are many activities that actually deliver benefits for both, and both actually provide financial incentives for your participation. The kind of main difference in carbon farming and nature repair is their aim. While carbon farming aims to mitigate climate impacts, nature repair aims to improve the ecosystem's resilience to changes in climate. So, stacking is a great way that we can combine these, where stacking is just combining a carbon farming and a nature repair project into one, on the same land at the same time. A stacked project must follow both approved methods though, and it allows you to earn ACCUs and biodiversity certificates at the same time. Projects can provide carbon storage and biodiversity improvements at the same time. And a good example of this, although it's not actually a formally stacked project, is the Gondwana Link project. So what they're doing is they're connecting different habitats and ecosystems and restoring biodiversity all the way from the far southwest of WA up to the goldfields by Kalgoorlie. So learning from country through observation, monitoring, and knowledge systems is quite important. And one way we can do this is through the use of traditional knowledge, as this has been built through long-term observation, often over thousands of years, and integration of this knowledge could prove to be quite beneficial. Ongoing and regular monitoring and observation is also essential for success. And changes in species, water, and vegetation all signal your ecosystem health and can inform your decision making. And this learning strengthens adaptive management and your ability to change. But one of the most important aspects of any of these projects is trust and consent, as this can make or break your project. As some of the decision makers, like Aboriginal elders or boards, they are the ones who shape how country is managed. And so free, prior and informed consent, also known as FPIC, is essential for projects to succeed. Where FPIC is just the right of Indigenous peoples to make voluntary and well-informed decisions about the activities that affect their lands, waters, resources and rights. As nature repair projects can affect your future land use options. So nature repair projects have permanence obligations and also restrict certain activities, such as the removal of plant material. So this could actually restrict self-determination and cultural practices and possibly reduce future economic opportunities and more. And many of these responsibilities extend into future generations, such as permanence. So what are the key takeaways from today's presentation? Well, number one, nature repair is just about restoring and protecting living systems, as healthy ecosystems underpin resilient country and lessen climate impacts. And repair requires patience, planning and responsibility, and continued learning supports informed actions. Just a little bit of extra here. There's a really interesting documentary called Fools and Dreamers: Regenerating a Native Forest. This is about nature repair work in New Zealand, although informal. The man here, he is not earning any money from doing this. This is in the Banks Peninsula in New Zealand and has about a 30-minute runtime and is available completely free on YouTube. The documentary follows Hugh Wilson as he works to regenerate marginal hilly farmland into a native forest. So what's up next? The next online workshop that we have running is the 11th of March at 11 AM. This workshop just goes through the background knowledge, the science and the systems behind carbon farming in Australia. You can check out our other upcoming events and webinars and sign up through the link on the screen here, or any queries that you have sent through to our email, also on the screen at the bottom there. Other than that, the next webinar is about climate change, and that'll be releasing on the 8th of March. And this webinar is just going to develop your understanding of what climate change is and what impacts we expect to see in Australia. And again, you can check it out through that link on the screen there, or email through that email there. Thanks for coming, everyone, and I hope you learned something new today.